20 doctors stood around billionaire Graham Whitaker's hospital bed, baffled by his sudden collapse at last night's gala. Harvard degrees and Swiss consultants couldn't explain why the most powerful man in medical technology was dying before their eyes. They ordered test after test, argued diagnosis after diagnosis, never once noticing the black woman mopping their floors. Amara Johnson kept her head down, wringing pink water from her mop, blood from another failed attempt, while her mind processed what these brilliant doctors kept missing. The symptoms didn't match any disease they were discussing. She'd seen this pattern before, 5 years ago, when her brother David died because doctors just like these wouldn't listen. But speaking up meant risking everything: her job, her mother's medical bills, their survival. The last time she tried to tell them something was wrong, they'd laughed her out of the room. Yet as she watched Graham Whitaker's body convulse again, Amara realized she was seeing something that would change everything. This wasn't medicine failing. This was murder. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The crystal chandeliers in the Whitaker Grand Ballroom cast dancing shadows across the marble floor, each facet catching light like captured stars. Graham Whitaker stood at the center of it all, his custom-tailored tuxedo as sharp as his reputation, raising a champagne flute toward the crowd of 500 guests who'd paid $10,000 a plate to be here. The annual Whitaker Foundation Gala was more than a charity event. It was a display of power, a reminder to everyone in the room exactly who controlled half the medical technology patents in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, Graham's voice boomed through the microphone, that familiar edge of arrogance coating every word like expensive varnish. Tonight, we celebrate not just philanthropy, but progress. Not just giving, but greatness. The crowd erupted in practiced applause. Senators nodded approvingly from their tables. CEOs raised their glasses. The 20 physicians Graham kept on personal retainer, specialists who'd abandoned their practices for his generous salaries, stood near the stage like palace guards in evening wear. Dr. Harrison Blackwell, Graham's chief physician, watched his employer with the satisfied expression of a man whose bank account had grown considerably fatter since joining the Whitaker medical team. Beside him, Dr. Margaret Stone, the renowned cardiologist who'd performed the world's first artificial heart valve replacement, sipped champagne and calculated her quarterly bonus. "My father built this empire from nothing," Graham continued, his voice growing stronger, more commanding. "But I've made it untouchable, unbreakable, The word caught in his throat. Graham's fingers, which had been gesturing grandly, suddenly gripped the podium's edge. The champagne flute slipped from his other hand, shattering against the stage in a cascade of crystal and Dom Perignon. For a moment, nobody moved. Graham's face, usually flushed with confidence and good wine, had gone the color of old paper. His eyes, those sharp gray eyes that could dissect a boardroom opponent in seconds, rolled back slightly. "Mr. Whitaker?" Dr. Blackwell was already moving, his years of emergency training overriding the shock. Graham's knees buckled. He pitched forward, his body crumpling like a marionette with severed strings. His head struck the podium's edge with a sickening crack before he hit the stage floor. The ballroom exploded into chaos. Women screamed. Phones appeared in every hand, some calling 911, others recording video that would be on social media within minutes. The press pool, corralled in the back corner, surged forward like hungry wolves scenting blood. Security guards formed a human wall, but they couldn't stop the cascade of shouting, the flash of cameras, the raw panic that rippled through the crowd. "Get back! Everyone get back!" Dr. Stone was on her knees beside Graham, her fingers pressed to his neck, searching for a pulse. Dr. Blackwell had already loosened Graham's bow tie and was checking his airway. "Weak pulse, thready," Dr. Stone announced to the growing circle of physicians. Dr. James Patterson, the neurosurgeon, was already on his phone to Mount Sinai Elite Medical Center, barking orders to prepare the VIP wing. Graham's children pushed through the crowd. Elena Whitaker, 32, her mother's delicate features hardened by years of boardroom battles, dropped to her knees beside her father. "Dad?" Dad, can you hear me? Her brother, Marcus Whitaker, 28, stood frozen at the edge of the medical scrum, his face pale. He'd been planning to ask his father for another loan tonight, another bailout for his failed ventures. Now he watched his meal ticket fighting for breath on the cold stage floor. "Where's the damn ambulance?" someone shouted. Victoria Whitaker, Graham's ex-wife, appeared at the stage's edge, her expression unreadable. They'd been divorced for 3 years, but the prenup had been ironclad. She got her settlement and nothing more. If Graham died tonight, the ambulance arrived in 4 minutes, a record for Manhattan, but it felt like hours. The EMTs found themselves surrounded by 20 of the most prestigious doctors in America, each one shouting instructions, none of them agreeing. "Possible stroke," Dr. Blackwell insisted. "Cardiac event," Dr. Stone countered. "Look at his eyes. This could be neurological," Dr. Patterson added. They loaded Graham onto the gurney, his body limp, his breathing shallow. The sirens wailed as the ambulance tore through the Manhattan streets, followed by a convoy of black SUVs carrying family, doctors, and lawyers who'd already begun calculating inheritance taxes. Mount Sinai Elite Medical Center's VIP wing looked more like a 5-star hotel than a hospital. Marble floors, private suites, original artwork on the walls. This was where senators came for their bypasses, where movie stars recovered from their overdoses. The 20th floor had been cleared completely. 20 specialists had been called in, each one commanding fees that could buy a house in the suburbs. They wheeled Graham into the surgical assessment suite, a room larger than most New York apartments. Machines that cost more than most people's yearly salaries hummed to life. The doctors descended like a well-dressed swarm, each one convinced they held the answer. "Give me a full panel," Dr. Blackwell ordered. "CBC, comprehensive metabolic, cardiac enzymes, everything. MRI, stat," Dr. Patterson added. "If this is a stroke, every second counts." "Echo first," Dr. Stone insisted. "Listen to his heart rhythm. It's all over the place." In the corner of the room, easily overlooked in the medical mayhem, a young woman in a gray uniform quietly mopped the floor where someone had tracked in dirt from outside. Amara Johnson, 28, had been cleaning this wing for 2 years. She'd learned to be invisible, to move like a ghost around the wealthy patients and their entourages. The gray uniform made her blend into the background, just another part of the hospital's infrastructure, no more noteworthy than the ventilation system or the fluorescent lights. She'd been about to go off shift when the call came in about the incoming VIP. All hands needed in the 20th floor, even housekeeping. She watched the doctors work, their hands flying over tablets, their voices overlapping in medical terminology she'd once known, once studied, back when she'd been a nursing student with dreams bigger than a mop bucket. "Watch where you're going." Dr. Richard Brennan, an orthopedic surgeon who hadn't even been needed but showed up anyway, snapped at Amara as she moved her cart slightly to avoid a nurse rushing past with blood samples. "Sorry, sir," Amara murmured, stepping back further into the corner. Graham's body convulsed slightly on the bed. His eyes fluttered open for a moment, unfocused, confused. His lips moved, forming words nobody could hear over the machine alarms and doctors' voices. "He's trying to say something," Elena said, pushing closer to her father. Graham's hand clutched at his side, fingers digging into his ribs, as if trying to tear something out from under his skin. His breathing became more labored, rattling in his chest. "O2 sats dropping," a nurse announced. 85%. "Get him on high-flow oxygen," Dr. Stone ordered. Amara watched from her corner, her trained eye, the eye that had once earned her top marks in her clinical assessments, noticed something the others missed. When a nurse adjusted Graham's foreline, moving it slightly to accommodate the oxygen tubing, Graham's breathing hitched. Not from the oxygen, but from the fore movement itself. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Amara had seen something similar once before, years ago, in a different life. The test results started coming back. Normal cardiac enzymes. No sign of stroke on the preliminary imaging. Blood work showed some inflammation, but nothing that explained the collapse. "This doesn't make sense," Dr. Blackwell muttered, scrolling through his tablet. "Everything's coming back within normal limits." "Run them again," Dr. Stone said. The lab must have made an error. Marcus Whitaker paced the private waiting room adjacent to the suite, his phone pressed to his ear. Yes, I understand the market is responding. No, we don't have a statement yet. The doctors they're working on it. Elena sat rigidly in a leather chair, her phone also out, but her fingers still. She was watching the doctors through the glass partition, her jaw clenched. They don't know, she said quietly. 20 of the best doctors in the world, and they don't have a clue. Victoria stood by the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Your father always said he was invincible, she said, her voice carrying a note of something. Satisfaction? Fear? It was hard to tell. Said death itself would have to make an appointment with his secretary. Don't, Elena warned. I'm just saying, perhaps if he'd been less concerned with playing God and more concerned with being human. Mother, please, Marcus interrupted, his face flushed. The company's stock is down 12% in after-hours trading. If he dies, you'll both be very wealthy, Victoria finished. Though I suspect that's not news to either of you. Elena stood abruptly. I'm going back in there. Through the glass, they could see Graham thrashing weakly on the bed, his body fighting something the machines couldn't identify, something the doctors couldn't name. Dr. Patterson was suggesting a lumbar puncture. Dr. Stone wanted to start him on broad-spectrum antibiotics. Dr. Blackwell was on the phone with a specialist in Switzerland. And in the corner, Amara Johnson continued to clean, her eyes never leaving the patient, her mind turning over that moment with the way his breathing had changed. She thought about her brother, David, about that night 5 years ago when the doctors had been so sure, so confident, right up until the moment he died. They'd missed something simple, something obvious, because they were too busy looking for something complex. As she wrung out her mop, she noticed something else. Graham's lips, underneath the oxygen mask, had a faint tinge to them. Not blue from lack of oxygen. The machines showed his O2 levels were stabilizing. This was different, subtler. A color she'd seen before, not in a textbook, but in a kitchen, years ago when she'd worked catering before landing this hospital job. The door to the suite burst open. Dr. Mitchell Crawford, the head of internal medicine, strode in like a general entering a battlefield. What do we have? The doctors began talking over each other, each one presenting their theory with the confidence of someone who'd never been wrong about anything important. Amara stepped aside as Dr. Crawford moved past her without a glance, as if she were a piece of furniture. Graham's body seized again, more violently this time. Alarm screamed. The heart monitor showed dangerous arrhythmias. He's going in a V-tach, Dr. Stone shouted. Get the crash cart. As the room exploded into controlled chaos, Amara found herself pushed further back, pressed against the wall. But from this angle, she could see something new. The way Graham's neck was swelling, so slightly that the doctors focused on his chest wouldn't notice. The pattern of his convulsions, not random, but following a specific neurological pathway she remembered from her anatomy classes. She knew she should stay silent. She was nobody here, just the help, just the woman who cleaned up after these important people made their important decisions. But as she watched them prepare to shock Graham's heart, as she saw them missing what seemed so clear to her, she felt that familiar ache, the same one she'd felt watching David die. The difference was, this time, she might be able to do something about it. If only anyone would listen to a housekeeper. The chaos in Graham Whitaker's suite had settled into a tense rhythm. 12 hours had passed since his collapse, and the 20th floor of Mount Sinai Elite had transformed into a medical war room. Doctors came and went in shifts, each one adding their expertise to the growing mountain of theories that led nowhere. Dr. Harrison Blackwell stood at the foot of Graham's bed, surrounded by his colleagues, pointing at a tablet displaying the latest test results. The metabolic panel shows slight elevation in liver enzymes, but nothing that would cause this presentation, he announced to the assembled team. His voice carried the authority of 30 years in medicine, even if his eyes betrayed growing uncertainty. It could be autoimmune, Dr. Patricia Hawthorne suggested, her reputation as the country's leading immunologist lending weight to her words. We should consider lupus, possibly adult-onset Still's disease. Dr. Stone shook her head. The cardiac irregularities don't fit. I still think we're looking at a complex arrhythmia syndrome, possibly Brugada. Brugada doesn't cause the neurological symptoms we're seeing, Dr. Patterson countered. He pulled up Graham's latest MRI on the wall-mounted screen. Look at this area here. There's slight inflammation in the temporal lobe. This could be encephalitis. The medical terminology flew across the room like bullets in a firefight, each doctor defending their position with the fervor of someone whose reputation was on the line. They'd run every test in the book: CT scans, MRIs, PET scans, genetic panels, toxicology screens that checked for over 300 substances. The bill was already approaching $500,000, not that anyone was counting. Marcus Whitaker stood in the doorway, his phone buzzing constantly. The board is meeting in an hour, he announced to the room. They need a medical update. What do I tell them? Dr. Blackwell straightened his tie, a nervous habit he'd developed since taking on Whitaker account. Tell them we're pursuing all diagnostic avenues. We have the best minds in medicine working around the clock. That's not an answer, Elena said sharply from her father's bedside. She hadn't left the room in 10 hours, hadn't eaten, hadn't slept. You're saying a lot of words that mean nothing. What's wrong with him? The doctors exchanged glances. Nobody wanted to be the one to admit they didn't know. Outside the suite, reporters had gathered like vultures. Someone had leaked that Graham Whitaker was in critical condition, and within hours, it was the top story on every financial network. Whitaker Industries stock had dropped 18%. Rival companies were already circling, smelling blood in the water. In the boardroom 30 floors below, Victor Dane sat at the conference table, his fingers steepled as he listened to the reports. As Whitaker Industries' chief operations officer, he was second in command, but he'd been second for too long. Gentlemen, he said to the assembled board members, we need to consider the possibility that Graham won't recover. The company needs stable leadership. Amara pushed her cleaning cart past the suite for the fourth time that shift. She'd been assigned to keep the VIP wing spotless. Apparently, rich patients needed cleaner floors than regular people. She could hear the doctors through the door, their voices raised in debate. She entered quietly, starting with the bathroom, working her way out. The doctors paid her no attention, which suited her fine. It let her observe, let her notice things they were too important to see. Graham's breathing had changed in the last hour. It was shallower, but with a specific pattern. Inhale, hold, quick exhale, pause. She'd seen it before in allergic reactions, when the airways were trying to protect themselves from an irritant. But the doctors had already ruled out allergies. The tox screen had been negative for all common allergens. We should intubate, Dr. Crawford suggested. His respiratory function is declining. That's premature, Dr. Stone argued. His O2 levels are holding steady at 91%. 91 isn't good enough, Dr. Crawford shot back. Not for a man his age, with his medical history. Amara moved closer, ostensibly cleaning the floor near the medical equipment. Graham's eyes were open but unfocused, darting back and forth like he was watching something nobody else could see. His lips moved constantly, forming silent words. What about heavy metal poisoning? Dr. Brennan suggested. Mercury lead, thallium? Already tested, Dr. Blackwell said wearily. All negative. Test again. The lab could have made an error. The lab doesn't make errors on VIP patients, Dr. Stone said. They ran everything twice. Amara noticed something else, the pattern of red marks on Graham's neck, just above his collar line. They looked like hives, but different somehow. More linear, almost like someone had drawn lines on his skin with a red pen. She'd seen similar marks once on a chef who'd been exposed to bad shellfish, but shellfish allergies didn't present like this. Unless, has anyone considered multiple simultaneous exposures? The words left Amara's mouth before she could stop them. The room went silent. 20 pairs of eyes turned to stare at her. Dr. Blackwell's face flushed red. Excuse me. Amara's hands tightened on her mop handle, but she pressed on. The patient, Mr. Whitaker, he was at a gala, right? Lots of different foods, drinks, environmental factors. What if it's not one thing, but several things interacting? Dr. Crawford laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. And what medical school did you graduate from, miss? Johnson, Amara said quietly. And I didn't. But I've seen. Then I suggest you stick to what you know. Dr. Crawford cut her off. Which is cleaning floors, not diagnosing patients. This is a sterile environment. Please maintain appropriate boundaries. Amara's face burned with humiliation, but she nodded and returned to her mopping. The doctors turned away from her, dismissing her as quickly as they'd noticed her. Where were we? Dr. Blackwell said loudly, as if to re-establish the room's hierarchy. Dr. Patterson, you mentioned encephalitis? But even as they continued their debates, throwing around increasingly exotic diagnoses, Amara kept watching. Graham's condition was deteriorating, but in a specific way. Every time a nurse adjusted his four, he flinched. Every time they moved the oxygen tube, his breathing changed. It was like his body was hypersensitive to everything. Elena noticed Amara watching and moved closer to her. You've seen something like this before? She asked quietly, keeping her voice low so the doctors wouldn't hear. Amara hesitated, then nodded slightly. Maybe, but I'm just. The help. I heard. Elena's eyes were desperate. But you're also the only person in this room who isn't trying to protect their reputation. What do you think is wrong with him? Before Amara could answer, Graham's body convulsed violently. The heart monitor erupted in alarms. His back arched off the bed, his hands clawing at his throat. He's seizing, Dr. Patterson shouted. Give me 2 milligrams of lorazepam stat. The nurse rushed to prepare the medication. As she pushed it through the foreport, Graham's convulsions intensified. Foam appeared at the corners of his mouth. It's not working, Dr. Stone said. His heart rate is through the roof, 180 and climbing. Another 2 milligrams, Dr. Patterson ordered. That could suppress his breathing, Dr. Crawford warned. We don't have a choice. Amara watched the 4-bag swing as the nurse administered the second dose. Something about it bothered her. The color was slightly off, more amber than clear. She'd handled thousands of saline bags in her time as a nursing student. This one looked different. Graham's seizure finally subsided, but his vital signs remained erratic. His skin had taken on a grayish tinge that made him look like a corpse even though he was still breathing. We need to transfer him to the ICU, Dr. Blackwell decided. Full life support if necessary. The press will have a field day, Marcus muttered. Your father's life is more important than the stock price. Elena snapped at her brother. Tell that to the board. They're already discussing succession planning. As they prepared Graham for transfer, Amara noticed something fall from his pocket, a napkin from the gala with something written on it. She picked it up discreetly. In shaky handwriting, it said, tasted wrong. She looked at the napkin more closely. There was a stain on it, yellowish-brown, with a familiar smell. Shellfish, specifically oyster sauce. But there was something else mixed with it, something chemical. Excuse me, she said again, knowing she was risking her job. Did Mr. Whitaker eat oysters at the gala? Dr. Blackwell spun around, his face purple with rage. I thought I made myself clear. You are not part of the medical team. One more word, and I'll have you removed from his hospital permanently. Harrison, perhaps we should, Dr. Stone began. No, Dr. Blackwell cut her off. We're not taking medical advice from housekeeping. It's absurd. Now, someone get her out of here. Security arrived to escort Amara out, but not before she caught Elena's eye. The younger woman looked thoughtful, filing away what Amara had said. As Amara was led away, she heard Dr. Patterson saying, what about toxic shock? Or Stevens-Johnson syndrome? Neither presents like this, Dr. Stone replied. They were grasping at straws now, throwing out increasingly unlikely diagnoses. Meanwhile, Graham Whitaker's body was shutting down system by system, and nobody knew why. In the hallway, Amara stood with her cart, her mind racing. She thought about her brother David, how the doctors had been so sure it was pneumonia right up until the autopsy revealed it was an allergic reaction to a medication interaction nobody had considered. She'd promised herself she'd never stand by again while someone died from medical arrogance. But what could she do? She was nobody, just a woman with a mop and memories of a medical education she'd never finished. Through the window, she could see them loading Graham onto a transport gurney. His son was on the phone with investors. His ex-wife was talking to someone who looked like a lawyer. And Elena stood alone, watching her father disappear down the hallway, tears finally breaking through her composed facade. The doctors followed like a parade of white coats, still arguing among themselves, still missing what seemed so obvious to Amara. The shellfish, the chemical smell, the way his body reacted to the four. She thought about that amber-tinted saline bag. In her 2 years at this hospital, she'd never seen one that color. Unless it wasn't supposed to be that color. Unless someone had added something to it. The thought hit her like ice water. This might not be a medical mystery at all. This might be attempted murder. But who would believe a housekeeper over 20 of the most respected doctors in New York? As she pushed her cart toward the supply closet, Amara made a decision. If the doctors wouldn't listen, she'd find another way. She'd investigate on her own, gather evidence, prove what she suspected. Graham Whitaker might be a billionaire who'd never noticed her existence, but he was still a human being. And Amara Johnson, invisible or not, wasn't going to let another person die on her watch. Not if she could help it. The amber-tinted four bag haunted Amara's thoughts as she pushed her cart through the 20th floor's quiet hallways at 3 in the morning. Most of the doctors had gone home or to their on-call rooms, leaving only the night shift to monitor Graham Whitaker's deteriorating condition. She'd clocked out officially 2 hours ago, but she'd stayed, unable to shake the feeling that she was watching a murder happen in slow motion. The employee break room was empty, just a coffee machine gurgling and fluorescent lights humming. Amara sat at the plastic table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched, letting memories surface that she usually kept buried. 5 years ago, she'd been different. Amara Johnson, nursing student, top of her class at Hunter College. She could still remember the weight of her textbooks, the excitement of her first clinical rotation, the pride in her mother's eyes when she'd gotten her acceptance letter. That was before David got sick, before the medical bills ate through their savings, before she had to choose between her education and her family survival. David had been 23, working construction, when he'd come home one day with what looked like the flu. Mom had taken him to the emergency room when his fever spiked. The doctors, not wealthy specialists like the ones upstairs, just regular ER doctors, had been confident. Viral infection, they said. Fluids and rest, they said. But Amara had noticed things. The way David's breathing changed when they gave him antibiotics. The rash that appeared and disappeared on his arms. The swelling in his joints that didn't match a viral pattern. She tried to tell them, tried to suggest they look at drug interactions, allergic responses, but she was just a second-year nursing student. What did she know? David died 3 days later. The autopsy revealed he'd had a rare reaction to the combination of antibiotics and an anti-inflammatory drug, complicated by an undiagnosed shellfish allergy triggered by something in the hospital's dietary supplements. 3 different factors, each harmless alone, deadly in combination. If someone had just listened, Amara shook off the memory and forced herself to focus on the present. Graham Whitaker wasn't David, and she wasn't that helpless student anymore. She might be wearing a janitor's uniform, but her mind still held all that medical knowledge, all that training. She pulled out her phone and began searching through medical databases she still had access to from her student account, somehow never deactivated. Multiple exposure reactions. Shellfish proteins. For contamination. The pieces were there, scattered like puzzle fragments, waiting to be assembled. A sound in the hallway made her look up. Elena Whitaker stood in the doorway, her designer dress wrinkled, her makeup smeared from tears she'd tried to hide. "You're still here," Elena said, not quite a question. "Just finishing up," Amara lied, starting to stand. "Don't." Elena moved into the room, closing the door behind her. "I've been thinking about what you said, about multiple exposures. The doctors won't listen to me. I'm just the daughter, too emotional to think clearly, apparently. But you've seen something, haven't you?" Amara hesitated. Trust didn't come easily in places like this, where every word could cost you your job. But something in Elena's desperation, in the raw fear for her father, made her decide. "Your father was at the gala for 3 hours before he collapsed," Amara said slowly. "He would have eaten, drunk, been exposed to dozens of different things. Any one of them could have triggered a reaction. But what if it wasn't just one? Elena sat down across from her, leaning forward. Go on. I found this. Amara pulled out the napkin she'd recovered. It was in his pocket. He wrote tasted wrong on it. And there's oyster sauce here, but mixed with something else. Something chemical. Elena took the napkin, studying it. He ate the oysters Rockefeller. It's his favorite. He has it at every gala. Is he allergic to shellfish? No, never has been. He eats seafood all the time. Amara nodded, her mind working. But what if someone knew he'd eat it? What if they added something to it? Something that wouldn't kill him immediately, but would start a reaction. And then she paused, wondering if she should voice her suspicion. And then what? The 4-bag. In his room. It's the wrong color. Saline should be clear, maybe slightly cloudy, but never amber. I think someone tampered with it. Elena's face went pale. You're saying someone's trying to kill him? I'm saying the symptoms match deliberate poisoning more than natural disease. The progression, the way he reacts to the 4 specifically, it's like someone's maintaining a toxic level in his system. We have to tell the doctors. They won't listen, Amara said flatly. You saw how Dr. Blackwell reacted. To them, I'm just the help. Less than that, even. Elena stood abruptly. Then we go around them. I'll demand new 4 bags, new everything. And if the person doing this is on a medical team, you'd be alerting them that we know. The implications hung between them. Elena sank back into her chair. What do you suggest? I need to look at the supply chain. Where the 4 bags come from. Who has access? But I can't do it officially. I need. Whatever you need, Elena interrupted. Access cards, passwords, I'll get them. My father might be a bastard sometimes, but he's still my father. They were interrupted by footsteps in the hallway. Dr. James Patterson appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted. Ms. Whitaker, your father's asking for you. He's lucid, but we don't know for how long. Elena jumped up. Is he? Stable for now. But you should come. Elena glanced at Amara, a silent communication passing between them, then followed the doctor. Amara waited a few minutes before heading back to the VIP wing, her mind cataloging everything she'd need to investigate. Graham's room was crowded again. The day shift was arriving, new doctors with fresh theories. Amara slipped in with her cart, immediately noting the 4-bag had been changed. This one was clear, normal looking. She made a mental note to check who'd ordered the change. Graham was indeed awake, his gray eyes focused on Elena. His voice was weak, raspy, but coherent. The oysters, he whispered. Something was wrong with the oysters. We know, Dad, Elena said, gripping his hand. We're figuring it out. Dr. Blackwell bustled over. Mr. Whitaker, excellent. Can you tell us what you're experiencing? Any pain? Numbness. Graham's eyes shifted to the doctor, then past him to Amara. For a moment, their gazes met. Did he recognize her? She'd cleaned his room dozens of times over the past year when he'd come in for his executive physicals. Always invisible, always ignored. Fire, Graham whispered. In my veins. When you. He gestured weakly at the 4. When that goes in. Fire. That's consistent with several conditions, Dr. Patterson said, making notes. We should run a peripheral nerve conduction study. Or Dr. Hawthorne added, it could be complex regional pain syndrome. They began debating again, their voices washing over Graham, who closed his eyes in exhaustion. But Amara had heard what she needed. Fire in his veins when the 4 ran. That wasn't a symptom. That was poison. She worked her way around the room, cleaning surfaces that were already spotless, watching everything. Dr. Brennan was texting constantly, barely looking at the patient. Dr. Stone kept checking her watch, mentioning she had a surgery scheduled at noon. Only Dr. Blackwell seemed fully focused, but there was something off about his attention, too eager, too performative. A notification popped up on one of the medical tablets left on the counter. Amara glanced at it while pretending to clean around it. A lab result had just come in. Graham's blood showed traces of something called tetrodotoxin, but at levels so low the lab had marked it as likely equipment contamination. Tetrodotoxin. Amara's breath caught. She knew that name from her toxicology studies. It was found in certain marine animals. Pufferfish, blue-ringed octopus, and in trace amounts in shellfish that had consumed certain algae. Not enough to kill on its own. But if someone had concentrated it, added it to the oysters, then maintained the dose through contaminated fluids. "Excuse me, you missed a spot." Amara looked up to find Dr. Blackwell standing over her, pointing an imaginary stain on the floor. "Yes, sir," she said, kneeling to clean the non-existent mark. "And when you're done here, the supply room needs attention," he added. "I noticed it was quite dusty earlier." The supply room, where the 4 bags were stored. Amara kept her face neutral, but her pulse quickened. "I'll get right on that, sir." As she gathered her supplies, she caught Elena's eye. The younger woman nodded slightly. She'd heard the exchange, too. The supply room was at the end of the hall, accessed by a key card that tracked every entry. Amara's card would show she'd entered for cleaning, nothing suspicious about that. But once inside, she had other plans. The room was organized with military precision. For bags on one wall, medications in locked cabinets, surgical supplies in sealed containers. Everything labeled, dated, tracked. Except, there, in the back corner, a box of 4 bags with a different lot number than the others. The label looked official, but something about the printing was off, slightly blurred, like it had been made on a different printer than the rest. Amara pulled out her phone, photographing everything. The lot number, the delivery date, the signature on the receipt. The signature was electronic, just a series of numbers, but she recognized the employee ID format. Footsteps in the hallway. Amara quickly pocketed her phone and grabbed her cleaning supplies, starting to dust the shelves just as the door opened. Marcus Whitaker stood there, looking surprised. "Oh, just cleaning." "Yes, sir. Dr. Blackwell asked me to clean the supply room." Marcus stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "My father. How does he look to you?" It was such an unexpected question that Amara almost dropped her duster. "Sir, you see everything, don't you? The invisible woman cleaning up after us all. So tell me, professional opinion, is he going to make it?" There was something in his tone, not concern but calculation. Amara chose her words carefully. The doctor seemed optimistic. Marcus laughed, bitter and short. "The doctors don't know their asses from their elbows. 20 specialists and they can't figure out what He stopped himself, but Amara heard what he hadn't said. What a janitor could see. "Your father's strong," she offered neutrally. "My father's a tyrant who's held on to power too long," Marcus said, his mask slipping. "Do you know he was planning to write me out of the will? After everything I've done for the company, all the times I've covered for his mistakes. He was going to leave everything to Elena." Amara kept dusting, but every sense was alert. "I wouldn't know about that, sir." "No, of course not." Marcus moved to the 4 bags, running his finger along the boxes. "Tell me, what would happen if someone were to accidentally contaminate one of these?" "That would be very serious, sir. People could die." "Yes." His finger stopped on the box with the different lot number. "They could." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You know, you should be careful in here. Sometimes people see things they shouldn't. And in a hospital, well, accidents happen all the time." The threat was clear. After he left, Amara stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. Marcus knew something. Maybe he was even involved. But why would he practically admit it to her? Unless he was trying to scare her off, which meant she was getting close to something. She finished her stage cleaning and left the supply room, heading back to Graham's suite. The doctors were in full debate mode again, but something had changed. Graham was worse, his breathing more labored, his skin taking on a yellowish tinge. "Liver failure," Dr. Stone was saying. "We need to start him on N-acetylcysteine immediately." "That's for acetaminophen overdose," Dr. Patterson argued. "It works for other toxins, too." Amara noticed the 4 bag had been changed again. Another amber-tinted one hung from the pole. She looked at the nurse's station chart. The change had been ordered by Dr. Blackwell, but the actual replacement had been done by someone whose initials she didn't recognize, VD. Victor Dane stood at the window of the hospital's executive conference room, watching the sunrise paint Manhattan in shades of gold and shadow. He'd been here all night, supposedly coordinating the company's response to Graham's medical crisis. In reality, he'd been orchestrating something far more complex. His phone buzzed. A text from an unlisted number. Phase 2 implemented. Deterioration should accelerate within the hour. Victor deleted the message immediately. then turned to face the board members who'd gathered for an emergency meeting. Gentlemen, ladies, we need to face facts. Graham Whitaker is dying, and the company needs leadership. Below, in the VIP wing, Amara was piecing together the puzzle with increasing urgency. She'd spent the last 2 hours going through trash bins, looking for discarded medical packaging, empty vials, anything that might provide evidence. What she found made her stomach turn cold. 3 empty vials labeled as saline, but with residue that smelled wrong, acidic chemical. A syringe wrapper that should have been in the sharps container, but had been thrown in regular trash. And most damning, a partial shipping label from a medical supply company she'd never heard of, Frontier Medical Solutions. A quick search on her phone revealed that Frontier Medical Solutions didn't exist. At least, not officially. The website was a single page. The address led to an empty warehouse in Queens. Someone had created a fake company to supply contaminated medical supplies. You're very persistent. Amara spun around to find Dr. Blackwell standing in the doorway of a utility closet where she'd been searching. His usual pompous expression had been replaced by something harder, more dangerous. "Just doing my job, sir," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "No, I don't think you are." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I think you're interfering in matters you don't understand. Do you have any idea what Graham Whitaker really is? What he's done? He's a patient who needs help." Dr. Blackwell laughed, harsh and bitter. "He's a monster who's destroyed hundreds of lives. Do you know how many small medical practices he's bought and gutted? How many doctors he's ruined with his corporate medicine empire? I had a practice once. 30 years of serving my community. Then Whitaker Industries bought the building, tripled the rent, forced me out. Now I'm his pet physician, dependent on his money. That doesn't justify murder," Amara said, backing toward the door. "Doesn't it?" Dr. Blackwell's eyes were wild now. "He killed my wife. Not directly, of course. But when we lost everything, when the stress caused her heart attack, when we couldn't afford the best care because he'd taken everything, that was Graham Whitaker. So you're poisoning him?" "I'm giving him justice." Dr. Blackwell pulled something from his pocket, a syringe filled with clear liquid. "The same justice anyone who interferes will receive." Amara's training kicked in. She grabbed the mop bucket beside her and flung the dirty water at his face. As he sputtered and stumbled back, she yanked open the door and ran. "Security!" Dr. Blackwell shouted behind her. "Stop that woman. She's stolen drugs." But Amara didn't head for the exit. She ran straight to Graham's room, bursting through the door just as a nurse was connecting a new 4-bag, another amber-tinted one. "Stop!" Amara shouted. "Don't connect that." The nurse froze, startled. Elena looked up from her father's bedside. "Amara? What's wrong?" "The 4 bags are poisoned." "Dr. Blackwell, he's..." Security guards rushed in, grabbing Amara's arms. Dr. Blackwell appeared, his face composed again, water stains on his coat, the only sign of their confrontation. "This woman attacked me," he said calmly. "She's been interfering with patient care, possibly stealing medications. She needs to be removed immediately." "Wait," Elena commanded, her voice carrying her father's authority. "I want to hear what she has to say. Ms. Whitaker, this is a medical matter. This is my father, and I have power of attorney while he's incapacitated." Elena stood, moving between Amara and the security guards. "Let her speak." Amara talked fast, knowing she had seconds before they dragged her away. "The tetrodotoxin in his blood, it's not contamination. Someone's been adding it to the 4 bags. That's why he gets worse every time they change them. Check the lot numbers. Check Frontier Medical Solutions. It's all fake." Dr. Patterson frowned. "Tetrodotoxin?" The lab said it was too low to matter," Amara interrupted. "But if it's being continuously administered through 4, maintaining a steady level, it would cause exactly these symptoms. The shellfish at the gala was just the initial dose to mask the real poisoning." "This is absurd," Dr. Blackwell said, but sweat was beading on his forehead. "She's a janitor with delusions." "Then test the 4-bag, Elena said. "Right now. If she's wrong, arrest her. If she's right." Dr. Stone moved to the 4-pole, carefully disconnecting the bag. "I'll run it to the lab myself." That won't be necessary, a new voice said from the doorway. Victor Dane entered, flanked by two men in suits who looked more like private security than hospital staff. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Dr. Blackwell was acting on my authority to try an experimental treatment. All perfectly legal, with a proper waiver signed. I never signed any waivers, Elena said. No, but your brother did. Victor smiled coldly. As co-medical proxy, his signature is sufficient. Marcus stepped out from behind Victor, his face pale but determined. It's for the best, Elena. Dad's dying anyway. This way, the company survives. Elena's face went white with rage. You're killing him for money? I'm saving thousands of jobs. Marcus shot back. If he dies slowly, the stock crashes, the company fails. This way, with Victor in charge, we merge with Dane Industries. Everyone wins. Except our father. Our father who is going to disinherit me? Who never thought I was good enough. Marcus's composure cracked. He made his choice. I made mine. During the argument, Amara noticed something. The nurse who'd been about to change the four. She was one of the regular staff, not someone she'd seen before. But the badge she wore had the same employee ID format as the signature on the contaminated supply delivery. That nurse, Amara said quietly to Elena. She's not really a nurse. Elena followed her gaze, then grabbed her phone. Security, I need. The fake nurse moved fast, pulling a knife from under her scrubs and lunging for Graham's breathing tube. If she cut it, he'd suffocate before anyone could react. Amara didn't think. She threw herself forward, catching the woman's wrist just as the blade touched the tube. They struggled, crashing into medical equipment. The knife skittered across the floor. Real security flooded the room. Not Victor's men, but hospital security Elena had called. The fake nurse was restrained, and suddenly everyone was shouting, pointing fingers, trying to explain. Enough! Elena's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone out except essential medical staff. And call the police. Real police, not hospital security. You can't, Victor started. I can and I am. I'm also calling the FBI, the SEC, and every news outlet in the city. Elena pulled out her phone. You wanted to do this quietly? That option just ended. Victor's face went cold. You're making a mistake. I have contracts, legal documents. Forged by my brother, who doesn't have sole medical authority. Elena shot back. And conspiracy to commit murder voids any contract. Dr. Blackwell made a break for the door, but security caught him. As they dragged him past Amara, he snarled, You think you've won? You think saving him changes anything? He's still a monster. Maybe, Amara said quietly. But that's for the law to decide, not you. As the room cleared, leaving only Elena, Amara, and the essential medical team, Dr. Stone returned from her impromptu lab run, her face grim. The 4 bag contains tetrodotoxin, concentrated shellfish proteins, and something else, a synthetic compound I've never seen before. If we connected it, she shook her head. He would have been dead within the hour. Elena turned to Amara, tears streaming down her face. You saved him. You saw what 20 doctors missed. I saw what they weren't looking for, Amara corrected. They were looking for disease. I was looking for murder. Graham's eyes fluttered open, focusing on Amara. His voice was barely a whisper, but she heard it clearly. Thank you. Dr. Stone took charge, her voice now respectful as she addressed Amara. What would you recommend for treatment? You seem to understand the poisoning better than any of us. Amara felt the weight of the moment. A housekeeper being asked for medical advice by one of the country's top doctors. She thought of David, of all the knowledge she'd gained too late to save him. Activated charcoal to absorb remaining toxins. Careful fluid management to flush his system without overloading his kidneys, and monitor for secondary infections from the immune suppression. The tetrodotoxin will metabolize out in 24 to 48 hours if we can keep him stable. Dr. Stone nodded, already making notes. Would you be willing to consult on his care? Officially, before Amara could answer, alarms started blaring. Not medical alarms, fire alarms. That's not a drill, someone shouted from the hallway. There's smoke in the ventilation system. Elena grabbed Amara's arm. Victor, he's not done. Through the window, they could see people evacuating, but Amara noticed something wrong. The smoke was coming from the vents, but only certain vents, the ones in this room. It's targeted, she said. They're trying to force us to move him. If we move him now, in his condition, Dr. Stone trailed off. He dies, Amara finished. That's the plan. They had minutes to figure out how to save Graham Whitaker from an enemy who seemed to have thought of everything. But Amara had one advantage. She knew this hospital's ventilation system inside and out. After all, she'd been cleaning those vents for 2 years. I have an idea, she said, already moving. But we'll need to work fast. The smoke was getting thicker, seeping through the specialized vents that fed Graham Whitaker's private suite. Amara Johnson stood at the center of the chaos, her mind racing through the hospital's ventilation blueprints she'd memorized during countless nights of cleaning air ducts and replacing filters. Everyone needs to stay calm, she said, her voice cutting through the growing panic. This smoke isn't from a fire. Smell it. No burning, just color vapor. They're using theatrical smoke mixed with something else. Dr. Stone was already checking Graham's oxygen levels. Whatever it is, it's affecting his breathing. O2 sats dropping to 87. We need to seal the room, Amara said, already moving. She grabbed medical tape from a supply drawer. Block every vent, every gap under the doors. Elena, get towels from the bathroom, wet them. Elena didn't question, just moved. It was strange how natural it felt, taking orders from the woman she'd barely noticed for 2 years. But Amara had a presence now, a confidence that came from finally being heard. You can't seal us in here, Dr. Patterson protested. We'll suffocate. No, we won't. Amara was already taping over the first vent. The room has emergency oxygen supplies. We can create positive pressure, push the smoke out instead of letting it in. She turned to the respiratory therapist. How many portable oxygen tanks do we have? 6 in this room, more in the supply closet. Get them all. We're going to flood this room with clean oxygen. Dr. Blackwell, still held by security near the door, laughed bitterly. You think you're so clever. You have no idea what you're up against. Victor Dane owns half this hospital's board. Even if you save Graham, you'll never prove anything. We'll see about that, Elena said, her phone recording everything. You just confessed on video. The smoke outside was getting thicker. Through the observation window, they could see people evacuating, nurses wheeling patients toward the stairwells. But something was off about the evacuation pattern. Look, Amara pointed. The evacuation is being directed toward the north stairwell only. But that's the longest route out. Why not use the south stairs? A crash from the hallway answered her question. Through the smoke, figures in firefighter gear appeared, but their movements were wrong, too coordinated, too purposeful. They weren't checking rooms for stragglers. They were heading straight for Graham's suite. Those aren't real firefighters, Amara said. Elena, call 911. Tell them someone's impersonating emergency responders. Elena was already dialing. Meanwhile, Dr. Stone and the remaining loyal medical staff had created a makeshift positive pressure system, oxygen hissing from multiple tanks, pushing against the smoke, trying to enter. The fake firefighters reached the door, one of them producing a keycard. But the door didn't open. Elena had engaged the emergency lockdown from inside. Open up, a muffled voice shouted. Fire department. This is a mandatory evacuation. Nice try, Elena called back. Real firefighters would know this wing has its own fire suppression system that hasn't activated. Because there's no actual fire. There's a pause, then the sound of something heavy hitting the door. They were trying to break in. Amara's mind raced. They had maybe 5 minutes before the door gave way. She looked around the room, taking inventory. Medical equipment, oxygen tanks for poles, chemicals in the locked cabinet. Dr. Stone, she said suddenly, can you prepare a syringe of succinylcholine? The doctor looked confused. That's a paralytic. Why would? Understanding dawned on her face. You're going to use it as a weapon. Last resort only. But we need options. As Dr. Stone prepared the syringe, Amara noticed Graham's eyes were open, watching everything with unusual clarity. The oxygen treatment was working, his color was improving, his breathing steadier. Can you speak? She asked him gently. Graham nodded weakly. Victor, he whispered, should have seen it coming. He's been planning this for years. Save your strength, Elena said, gripping his hand. No. Graham's voice grew slightly stronger. Need to tell you, the company has recordings. Everything's recorded in the boardroom. Security feature I never told anyone about. Even Victor doesn't know. Elena's eyes widened. So his planning sessions, his conversations about this, all recorded. Hidden server in my office. Behind the Monet. The battering on the door intensified. Cracks appeared in the reinforced glass window. We need a plan, Dr. Patterson said, fear creeping into his voice. Amara looked at the oxygen tanks, then at the emergency sprinkler system on the ceiling. Actually, I have one, but it's going to require perfect timing. She explained quickly. It was risky, possibly insane, but it might work. Dr. Stone nodded approval. Even Dr. Patterson agreed. It was better than waiting to be overrun. They positioned themselves carefully. Amara stood near the emergency shower station, used for chemical spills. Elena crouched behind Graham's bed with the emergency alarm button. Dr. Stone held the prepared syringe, ready if needed. The door's window shattered. A hand reached through, fumbling for the lock. Amara waited until the last second, then yanked the emergency shower handle. Water exploded from the ceiling, not just over the shower station, but throughout the room. She'd triggered the full decontamination protocol. The fake firefighters, caught off guard, stumbled back as gallons of water poured through the broken window into the hallway. Now, Amara shouted. Elena hit the emergency alarm. Not the fire alarm, but the medical emergency code blue. Real help would come, but more importantly, it would trigger automatic recording of everything in the room for legal protection. The lead fake firefighter pushed through the water, reaching for a weapon. Dr. Stone moved with surprising agility for her age, jabbing the syringe into his neck. He collapsed instantly, paralyzed but conscious. Succinylcholine didn't affect awareness, just movement. He would recover in minutes, but that was all they needed. The other attackers hesitated, seeing their leader down. In that moment of confusion, real firefighters appeared at the end of the hallway, followed by police officers Elena had called. Nobody move! A police sergeant shouted, weapon drawn. The fake firefighters tried to run, but found their exit blocked. The north stairwell they'd herded everyone toward was now full of evacuated patients and staff, and more police coming up. Victor Dane's voice crackled over one of their radios. Abort! Abort immediately! But it was too late. They were trapped. As the police took the conspirators into custody, Amara finally allowed herself to breathe. She was soaked from the decontamination shower, exhausted from the adrenaline, but Graham Whitaker was alive. You did it, Elena said, water dripping from her ruined designer dress. You actually did it. We did it, Amara corrected. I couldn't have managed without you trusting me. Dr. Stone approached them, her expression humble. Ms. Johnson, I owe you an apology. We all do. We were so blinded by our degrees and positions that we couldn't see what was right in front of us. You saw it when it mattered, Amara said. Graham's voice, stronger now, called out. Bring her here. Amara approached his bedside. The billionaire who'd never noticed her in 2 years of service looked at her with clear, grateful eyes. You saved my life, he said, despite how we all treated you. Why? Amara thought of David, of all the people failed by arrogance and assumption. Because every life matters. Even yours. Graham was quiet for a moment. Then, you were a nursing student. Elena told me. What happened? Life happened, Amara said simply. I want to change that. Full scholarship, living expenses, whatever you need to finish your education. And a position at any hospital in my network when you graduate. Amara felt tears prick her eyes, but held them back. That's generous, but it's not generosity. It's justice. And speaking of justice, Graham turned to his son, Marcus, who stood in handcuffs near the door. You're done. Cut off completely. And Victor. He smiled coldly. Victor's about to learn what happens when you try to kill someone who knows where all the bodies are buried. The next 12 hours transformed Mount Sinai Elite Medical Center into a crime scene. FBI agents swarmed the 20th floor, interviewing everyone from the chief of medicine to the night janitors. Amara found herself at the center of it all, no longer invisible, but essential to understanding what had happened. She sat in a hospital conference room, Agent Sarah Coleman across from her, recording everything. Elena had insisted on getting Amara a lawyer, one of the best in the city, who sat beside her, taking notes. "Walk me through it again," Agent Coleman said. "When did you first suspect something was wrong?" "The 4-bag color," Amara explained for the third time. "I've handled thousands of them. The amber tint was subtle, but wrong. Then the way Mr. Whitaker reacted specifically when the 4 was adjusted, not just to the medication, but to the physical movement of the line. And you reported this to the medical staff?" "I tried. Dr. Blackwell dismissed me. Dr. Crawford actually laughed." Amara kept her voice neutral, professional. She wouldn't let bitterness creep in now. But Elena Whitaker listened. Eventually, yes. She was desperate. Sometimes desperation makes people more willing to hear uncomfortable truths. Agent Coleman nodded, making notes. "The tetrodotoxin. How did you know to look for that specifically?" "I didn't at first. But the combination of shellfish exposure and the symptoms, it fit the pattern. My brother died from a misdiagnosis involving multiple factors. I learned to look for complex interactions, not just single causes." "Your brother's death, that was 5 years ago?" "Yes. And you dropped out of nursing school to support your family after that?" Amara nodded. The lawyer beside her shifted, ready to object if the questioning got too personal, but Amara waved him off. "She had nothing to hide. Yet you retained enough medical knowledge to diagnose something 20 specialists missed." "They weren't looking for murder," Amara said simply. "They were looking for disease. When you're expecting horses and you hear hoofbeats, you don't look for zebras. But sometimes it really is zebras." A knock on the door interrupted them. Dr. Stone entered, looking exhausted but determined. "Agent Coleman, I need to add something to my statement," she said, then turned to Amara. "I've been reviewing the medical records, all of Graham's test results. You were right about everything. The progression, the timing, even the specific concentration needed to maintain toxicity without immediate death. I've been practicing medicine for 30 years, and I missed what you saw immediately." "You weren't looking," Amara started. "No," Dr. Stone interrupted. "That's an excuse. The truth is, I didn't listen because of who you were, or who I thought you were. That's on me, not the circumstances." Agent Coleman looked between them. "Dr. Stone, are you saying the medical team's failure was due to prejudice?" Dr. Stone straightened. "I'm saying that institutional blindness, whether from prejudice, arrogance, or simple assumption, nearly cost a man his life. And yes, that includes prejudice. We saw a black woman in a janitor's uniform and assumed she couldn't possibly know anything medical. That assumption almost let murderers succeed. The weight of the admission hung in the air." Amara appreciated the honesty, even if it came too late for David, too late for all the other invisible people whose voices went unheard in places like this. "I need to get back to Mr. Whitaker," Dr. Stone said. "He's asking for you, Ms. Johnson. Both of you," she added to Elena, who had just appeared in the doorway. They walked together through hallways now filled with investigators photographing evidence, technicians checking every 4-bag in the hospital, administrators trying to manage the publicity nightmare. The story had broken on every major network. Billionaire poisoned in hospital, saved by Housekeeper. Graham's room had been cleaned of water damage, the broken door replaced. He was sitting up now, color returned to his face, looking more like the powerful businessman who'd commanded that charity gala just 2 days ago. But his eyes were different, humble perhaps, but just exhausted. "Amara," he said as she entered, "I've been thinking. Dangerous thing for a man in my position. Thinking." "Dad," Elena warned. "The doctors said not to strain yourself." "I'm not straining. I'm clarifying." He focused on Amara. "I built my empire on the assumption that money could buy everything, talent, loyalty, even health. I surrounded myself with the best doctors money could attract, and they all failed. You succeeded." "What?" Amara considered her words carefully. "Because I had nothing to lose by speaking truth. They had everything to lose by admitting ignorance." Graham nodded slowly. Victor counted on that. On their pride, their fear of being wrong. He knew they'd never consider murder because that would mean admitting they'd missed something basic. Where's Victor now? Elena asked. In custody, Graham said with satisfaction. And singing like a canary, according to my lawyers. Trying to pin everything on Harrison and Marcus. But the recordings from my office boardroom show otherwise. 2 years of planning, all caught on tape. He turned back to Amara. I meant what I said about the scholarship, but I want to offer more. I want you to head a new department at Whitaker Medical. Patient advocacy, specifically focused on ensuring all voices are heard, regardless of who they come from. That's, Amara started. Necessary, Graham finished. How many people die because someone like you isn't listened to? How many mistakes happen because of institutional blindness? This can't just be about my gratitude. It needs to be about change. Dr. Stone spoke up. I'd like to be part of that, if you'll have me. I have a lot to learn about listening. Over the next hours, as Graham's condition continued to improve, the full scope of Victor's plot emerged. He'd been planning the takeover for 2 years, slowly placing his people in key positions. The fake nurse was a former military medic he'd hired. The false firefighters were private security contractors. Dr. Blackwell had been recruited 6 months ago, his bitterness making him an easy mark. The contaminated 4 bags had been introduced gradually, mixed in with legitimate supplies. The plan was elegant in its complexity. Graham would die slowly of unknown causes. The company would panic, and Victor would step in as the savior, merging it with his own holdings. Except he didn't count on you, Elena told Amara as they sat in the hospital cafeteria that evening, both exhausted. The FBI had finally finished with their interviews. He didn't count on anyone looking past the surface, Amara corrected. That's the real blindness, assuming the surface is all there is. Elena's phone buzzed. She looked at it and smiled. The board just voted. Unanimous decision to press full charges against Victor and to support my father's recovery. And she looked up. They want to meet you. Officially. They're interested in this patient advocacy department idea. Amara felt overwhelmed. 2 days ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was being invited to boardrooms, offered positions, called a hero by the media. It didn't feel real. There's something else, Elena said carefully. The investigators found something in Victor's files. A list of other problems he was planning to solve. Other people in various hospitals who might be in danger. The FBI wants your help identifying potential poisoning victims. Of course, Amara said immediately. It would mean working with the same types of doctors who dismissed you, who dismissed your brother's symptoms. Amara thought of David, of the promise she'd made at his grave to somehow make his death mean something. Then maybe I can help them see what they've been missing. Dr. Patterson appeared in the cafeteria, looking sheepish. He approached their table hesitantly. Ms. Johnson, I owe you an apology. I was one of the voices dismissing your observations. I let my ego override my judgment. Apology accepted, Amara said simply. I was wondering, would you be willing to give a lecture to our residents? About observational diagnosis, about looking beyond the obvious. Amara almost laughed at the irony. A janitor lecturing doctors? A colleague lecturing colleagues, Dr. Patterson corrected. That's what you are, degree or no degree. A colleague we failed to recognize. As the evening wore on, more people approached. Nurses who'd seen things but been afraid to speak up. Orderlies with observations that had been dismissed. Even other housekeeping staff who'd noticed patterns but assumed no one would listen. Graham had been right. This was bigger than one incident. It was about a system that designated some voices as worth hearing and others as background noise. Late that night, Amara finally made it home to her small apartment in Queens. Her mother was waiting, having seen everything on the news. My baby saved a billionaire, her mother said, tears in her eyes. I saved a person, Amara corrected, hugging her. The billionaire part was incidental. David would be so proud. I hope so. Her phone rang. It was Elena. I'm sorry to call so late, Elena said. But something's happened. The security footage from the gala, the FBI was reviewing it. They found something. The person who contaminated the oysters, it wasn't who he thought. Amara tensed. Who was it? We don't know yet. But whoever it was, they're still out there. And if Victor's records are right, my father wasn't their only target. There's a whole list, Amara. A conspiracy bigger than just one takeover. Amara looked at her mother, safe in their small apartment, then thought of all the other potential victims out there, people whose only crime was being in someone's way. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "Help us stop them. All of them. Will you?" Amara didn't hesitate. Yes. The invisible woman had found her voice. Now was time to use it. The FBI command center had taken over the entire 15th floor of Mount Sinai Elite Medical Center. Whiteboards covered with photos, timelines, and connection webs lined the walls. At the center of it all, Amara Johnson sat beside Agent Sarah Coleman, reviewing security footage from the Whitaker Foundation gala frame by frame. "There," Amara pointed at the screen. "That catering worker. See how he's holding the tray? He's favoring his left wrist, like he's protecting something under the sleeve." Agent Coleman zoomed in. A tattoo was barely visible, a serpent eating its own tail. "Ouroboros," she muttered, "symbol of eternal return. Or in some contexts, destroying yourself to be reborn." "He's in 3 different shots near the oyster station," Amara continued. "But look at this." She pulled up another angle. When he walks away, there's a slight bulge in his jacket pocket that wasn't there before. Elena Whitaker entered the room, her face grave. "We have a problem. 3 of the people on Victor's target list have been admitted to hospitals in the last 12 hours. Different symptoms, different cities, but the pattern is the same. Mysterious illness, doctors baffled." "Where?" Agent Coleman was already pulling up maps. "Boston, Philadelphia, and Miami. All CEOs of medical companies that competed with my father." Amara studied the information Elena provided. Different symptoms, but same progression pattern. Initial exposure at a public event, followed by escalating complications in medical care. Someone's using the same playbook. "But Victor's in custody," Agent Coleman pointed out. "Victor was middle management." Graham's voice came from the doorway. "He was in a wheelchair, pushed by Dr. Stone, but his color was good, his eyes sharp. I've been reviewing the recordings from my boardroom. Victor took orders from someone else. Someone he only referred to as the architect. Dad, you should be resting," Elena protested. "I'll rest when this is finished." Graham wheeled himself closer to the screens. "Agent Coleman, the man with the tattoo. I've seen him before. He worked for Meridian Health Systems until 6 months ago. That's one of the companies on the target list," Coleman noted. "The CEO in Boston who just got sick. That's Robertson from Meridian," Elena added, checking her phone. "He's in critical condition. The doctors can't figure out what's wrong." Amara stood up. "We need to get to Boston. If it's the same poisoning method, I might be able to help." "The FBI can send our medical experts," Coleman started. "With respect, Agent Coleman, your medical experts aren't who saved my father," Graham interrupted. "Amara goes with full authority." Elena, arrange the jet. Within an hour, Amara found herself on Graham Whitaker's private plane, accompanied by Agent Coleman, Dr. Stone, and a team of FBI medical analysts. The flight to Boston took less than an hour, but Amara used every minute, reviewing the limited information they had on Robertson's condition. "Neurological symptoms, cardiac irregularities, respiratory distress," she read. But the onset was different. Faster. More aggressive. "Maybe they're refining their method," Dr. Stone suggested, learning from what didn't work with Graham. The plane descended toward Boston. Through the window, Amara could see Massachusetts General Hospital sprawling below. Another prestigious medical center, another set of brilliant doctors probably missing what was right in front of them. They were met at the hospital by Dr. James Liu, chief of emergency medicine, who looked skeptical. "I understand you believe this is connected to the Whitaker case, but our patient's presentation is completely different. Different symptoms, same underlying cause," Amara said. "Has Mr. Chen mentioned anything about unusual taste or smell? Any recent public events?" "He was at a pharmaceutical conference yesterday. And yes, he did mention the wine tasted off, but we assumed there was early neurological involvement affecting his senses." "It wasn't. Someone dosed him there." "What treatments have you started?" Dr. Liu bristled. "I don't believe we've been introduced." "You are. Someone who can save your patient if you'll listen," Amara said, pushing past him. "Agent Coleman can explain the formalities." Right now, we need to check every bag, every medication he's received since admission. Robert Chin's room was a mirror of Graham's from 2 days ago. Expensive, private, and full of confused doctors. The patient himself was unconscious, intubated, machines keeping him alive. Pull all his medications, Amara ordered, her natural authority surprising even herself. Everything administered in the last 12 hours. You can't just come in here and, one doctor started. Agent Coleman flashed her badge. FBI. This is a federal investigation into attempted murder. You'll do exactly as Ms. Johnson says. As the staff scrambled to comply, Amara examined Chun. The symptoms were similar to Graham's, but accelerated. The poisoner had learned, adjust to the dose. There, Dr. Stone pointed to an 4-bag. Same amber tint. Get it to the lab, Amara said, and prepare activated charcoal, NAC protocol, and she paused, thinking, Dr. Liu, does your pharmacy stock Prussian blue? For radiation poisoning? Why would? Not radiation. Thallium. I think they've added thallium to the mix this time. It would explain the faster neurological decline. Dr. Liu's skepticism cracked. The hair loss. He's been losing hair since this morning. We thought it was stress-related, but thallium poisoning causes rapid hair loss. Test for it, but start treatment now. We don't have time to wait for confirmation. As the Boston team rushed to implement her protocols, Amara's phone rang. Elena's voice was panicked. The CEO in Philadelphia just died. The one in Miami is on life support. And Amara, we found something else in Victor's files. A date. Tomorrow. Something big is planned for tomorrow. What's tomorrow? Amara asked. The National Medical Innovation Summit. Every major healthcare CEO in the country will be there. 500 potential targets in one room. Amara felt her blood chill. This wasn't just about taking down rivals. It was about reshaping the entire medical industry. Where's the summit? Washington, D.C. It starts at noon. Amara looked at her watch. It was already 10 p.m. 14 hours to stop a mass poisoning. Elena, I need everything about that summit. Guest list, catering company, security protocols, everything. She turned to Agent Coleman. We need to get to D.C. I'll mobilize a full team. No, Amara thought quickly. Too many agents will tip them off. They'll abort or change methods. We need to be subtle. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You saved one. You won't save them all. Ugh. The architect. They were watching, taunting. Another text. The shepherd protects the flock, but who protects the shepherd? Amara's blood ran cold. My mother. Someone needs to check on my mother. Agent Coleman was already on her phone, dispatching agents to Queens. Minutes later, confirmation came. Amara's mother was safe, agent stationed at her apartment. They're trying to distract you, Coleman said. No, they're telling me I'm getting close. Amara studied the message again. The shepherd and the flock. It's medical terminology. Doctors are shepherds, patients are the flock. So who's the architect? Dr. Stone asked. Before Amara could answer, alarms started blaring in Chen's room. His heart rhythm had gone erratic. V-fib, a nurse shouted. Amara rushed back. Something was wrong. They'd removed the contaminated started treatment, but he was getting worse. Check the oxygen line, she ordered, remembering the smoke attack at Mount Sinai. Check everything connected to him. Dr. Liu pulled the oxygen tube from the wall connection and smelled it. His face went white. Bitter almonds. Cyanide, Amara breathed. They poisoned the oxygen supply. Everybody out. Dr. Liu ordered. Full hazmat protocols. As they evacuated Chun to a clean room with portable oxygen, Amara realized the terrifying truth. The architect wasn't just targeting individuals. They had people inside multiple hospitals, a network of poisoners. Agent Coleman's phone rang. She listened, her face growing grim. 3 more CEOs just collapsed. Chicago, Seattle, and Denver. All within the last hour. They're accelerating the timeline, Amara said. They know we're onto them. Graham's voice came through Elena's phone on speaker. I've been thinking about the architect comment. In my recordings, Victor mentioned someone who built the foundation for a new medical order. Those exact words. A new medical order, Amara repeated. that hit her. The summit tomorrow. They're not just going to poison people. They're going to present a solution, create the crisis, then offer the cure. Classic manipulation, Coleman agreed. But who has that kind of reach? Amara thought about everyone she'd seen in Graham's room. Everyone with access, everyone with knowledge. Then she remembered something, a comment made in passing, dismissed at the time. "Dr. Crawford," she said suddenly. Mitchell Crawford, head of internal medicine at Mount Sinai. He was in Graham's room briefly, but he said something odd. He asked what would happen if someone accidentally contaminated an 4-bag. But he asked it theoretically, like he was curious about the method. Coleman was already pulling up Crawford's file. Distinguished career, published hundreds of papers, sits on the boards of 12 hospitals, and he's the keynote speaker at tomorrow's summit. The shepherd, Amara whispered. He's been positioning himself as the savior. Poison the industry leaders, then step in with his revolutionary new healthcare model. Elena's voice was urgent. His topic for the keynote, rebuilding healthcare from the ashes of corruption. Ashes he's creating, Dr. Stone said grimly. The Gulfstream G650 cut through the night sky toward Washington, D.C., carrying Amara, Agent Coleman, and a small team of specialists. They had 11 hours until the summit, 11 hours to stop what could be the largest mass poisoning in history. Amara studied the summit layout on her tablet. The Walter E. Washington Convention Center, 500 attendees, 6 catering stations, 3 bars, and a formal luncheon. Countless opportunities for poisoning. "We can't test every piece of food and drink," Coleman said. "It's impossible." "We don't need to," Amara replied. Crawford's pattern is consistent. He targets specific individuals, not random victims. He'll focus on the biggest players, the ones whose deaths would cause the most chaos. That's still dozens of people, unless we make him come to us. Amara looked up from her tablet. Graham should announce he's attending. Elena's voice came through the conference call. "Absolutely not. My father just survived one attempt." "I agree with Amara," Graham interrupted. "Crawford thinks I'm still critical, too weak to attend. If I show up, he'll have to improvise. Improvisation leads to mistakes. It also leads to desperation," Coleman warned. "Desperate people do dangerous things. Then we'd better be ready." Amara pulled up Crawford's published papers. "Look at this. 5 years ago, he wrote about controlled population reduction in medical leadership to facilitate systemic change. Everyone thought it was theoretical. He's been planning this for years," Dr. Stone said, reading over her shoulder. "My God, he actually published his manifesto, and nobody realized it." The plane landed at a private airfield outside D.C. at 2 a.m. FBI vehicles waited to take them to a safe house where they could coordinate without being detected. The safe house was already buzzing with activity. Tech specialists had pulled Crawford's communications, financial records, and travel history. The web they uncovered was staggering. "He's got people in 17 hospitals," one analyst reported. "Nurses, orderlies, even some doctors, all recruited over the past 3 years." "How did nobody notice?" Coleman asked. "Because he recruited people like me," Amara said quietly. "Invisible people. The ones nobody pays attention to. Housekeepers, food service, maintenance. People who have access to everything but are seen by no one." It was brilliant in its simplicity and horrifying in its scope. "We've identified 14 probable targets at the summit," another analyst said. "All CEOs or board chairs of major health systems. Including me," Graham added, entering the safe house in person, despite everyone's protests. "If we're doing this, I'm not hiding." Elena was with him, along with a security detail that looked like a small army. "The summit starts in 8 hours. What's our play?" Amara had been thinking about this. "We can't stop him from trying. There are too many variables. But we can control how he does it." She laid out her plan. It was risky, requiring precise timing and absolute coordination. But it could work. "You want to let him poison people?" Coleman sounded incredulous. "No, I want him to think he's poisoning people. We replace key personnel with FBI agents. We swap out the real food and drinks with safe alternatives that look identical. We let him execute his plan, then catch him and his entire network in the act." "That's insane," Elena said. That's brilliant, Graham countered. Crawford's ego is his weakness. He needs to see his plan succeed, needs to be there for his moment of triumph. They spent the next hours in frantic preparation. FBI agents who could pass for catering staff were briefed and positioned. The convention center's real food service was quietly diverted, replaced with carefully monitored supplies. At 6 a.m., Crawford made his move. Security cameras caught him entering the convention center through a service entrance, 2 hours before his official arrival time. He went straight to the kitchen. He's checking his preparations, Coleman observed, watching the feeds, making sure his people are in place. Amara watched Crawford on the screen. He moved with confident purpose, unaware that the staff he was inspecting were mostly FBI agents, that the containers of poison he was checking were filled with harmless saline and food coloring. At 10 a.m., attendees began arriving. Amara, dressed in borrowed business attire that Elena had provided, stood in the convention center's security office, watching multiple screens. Every major figure in American healthcare was walking into what they thought was a networking opportunity. Graham Whitaker just arrived, an agent reported. On screen, Graham entered the main hall, looking remarkably healthy for a man who'd been at death's door 2 days ago. The reaction was immediate. Whispers, stares, people pulling out phones. Crawford's reaction was caught on camera. His composed mask slipped for just a moment, showing surprise, then calculation, then something that might have been admiration. He's adapting, Amara said. Watch for changes in pattern. Sure enough, Crawford diverted from his scheduled path, heading toward his service corridor. He pulled out his phone, sending rapid texts. He's calling an audible, Coleman said. All units, be ready. The summit officially began at noon. Crawford took the stage for his keynote, and Amara had to admit he was compelling. He spoke about corruption in healthcare, about the need for dramatic change, about rising from ashes. The audience was captivated. In exactly 3 minutes, Crawford said, building to his crescendo, you'll understand that change isn't just necessary. It's inevitable. That was the signal. Around the room, Crawford's plants began their work. A waiter dropped something into the bourbon at the bar. A woman in catering uniform injected something into the coffee urns. A maintenance worker adjusted something on the ventilation system. All of it captured on camera. All of it harmless, thanks to the FBI's substitutions. Crawford continued speaking, watching the room, waiting for the chaos to begin. 3 minutes passed, then 5, then 10. Nothing happened. The audience applauded his speech, but nobody collapsed. No one showed symptoms. Crawford's smile grew fixed, confused. Now, Amara said into her radio. FBI agents moved in perfect coordination. Every plant was detained simultaneously. Crawford, still on stage, watched his network crumble in real time. Dr. Mitchell Crawford, Agent Coleman announced, walking onto the stage. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit mass murder. Crawford's composure finally shattered. You don't understand. The system is diseased. It needs to be burned down and rebuilt. Maybe, Amara said, stepping onto the stage beside Coleman. But not with poison and not with murder. Crawford focused on her, and recognition dawned. The housekeeper. You're the one who saved Whitaker. I'm the one who stopped you, Amara corrected. As they led Crawford away, he turned back one last time. You think you've won? The system is still broken. Nothing will change. You're wrong, Graham said, approaching the stage. Change is already happening, starting with people like Amara being heard. The summit continued, transformed from a networking event into a crisis response session. The attempted mass poisoning became a catalyst for real discussion about healthcare reform, about institutional blindness, about the voices that go unheard. Later, in the FBI debriefing, the full scope of Crawford's network was revealed. 43 conspirators across the country, hundreds of pounds of various poisons, and a plan that would have killed at least 60 industry leaders. He called it the Great Purification, Coleman explained. He genuinely believed he was saving healthcare by destroying its current leadership. The scary part, Amara said, is that he identified real problems. Inequality, corruption, systémique failure. He just chose the worst possible solution. Graham approached her after the debriefing. I've been thinking about what Crawford said, about the system being broken. He's not wrong about that part. No, Amara agreed. He's not. So let's fix it. The right way. I'm restructuring Whitaker Medical, creating that patient advocacy department we discussed, but bigger. A whole division dedicated to ensuring every voice is heard, every concern is addressed. And I want you to run it. I haven't even finished my nursing degree. You saved dozens of lives in 3 days. You saw what trained doctors missed. You broke up a national conspiracy. I think you're qualified. Elena added, the board's already approved it. Unanimous vote. They're also funding a scholarship program in your brother's name for healthcare workers from underserved communities. Amara felt tears threaten. David's death had started this journey. Now his memory would help others avoid the same fate. There's one more thing, Agent Coleman said. Crawford had a final message. For you specifically. She handed Amara a sealed envelope, found in Crawford's hotel room. Inside was a single line. The shepherd is caught, but the flock remains diseased. Amara looked at the message, then at the room full of people working to make things better. Maybe, but now we know to listen for the bleeding. As the sun set over Washington, Amara stood at the window, thinking about the past 3 days. She'd gone from invisible to indispensable, from silence to heard. But more importantly, she'd shown that every voice matters, that wisdom doesn't only come from degrees and titles. Graham stood beside her. What are you thinking? That Crawford was right about one thing. Healthcare does need to change. So we'll change it. Together. All of us. Doctors, nurses, housekeepers, patients. Everyone. Amara nodded. The real work was just beginning. The FBI command center in Washington had gone quiet after Crawford's arrest, agents beginning to pack up equipment, when Amara's phone buzzed with an urgent text from a number she didn't recognize. Check Mount Sinai's ICU ventilation. 3 Uhr nachts. Your billionaire isn't safe yet. She showed it to Agent Coleman, who immediately tried to trace the number. It's a burner phone, already dead. But if this is real, it's 2:12 a.m. now, Amara said, her pulse quickening. We have less than an hour. Graham, who'd been giving his statement to other agents, overheard. Crawford's in custody. His network's been rolled up. Who's left? Someone who knew the plan well enough to warn us, Amara reasoned. Someone with access who maybe had second thoughts. Elena was already on her phone with Mount Sinai security. They're checking now. Wait, what? Her face paled. They found a device. In the ventilation system of the ICU, where Dad was supposed to be moved for recovery. But I'm here, Graham said. They didn't know you'd leave for D.C., Amara realized. This was a failsafe. If everything else failed, if you survived and returned to Mount Sinai, Agent Coleman was coordinating with the NYPD bomb squad. They need someone who understands the poisoning methods. The device has what looks like an aerosol dispersal system. I'm going, Amara said. It's in New York. By the time we fly there. The FBI has a helicopter on standby, Coleman interrupted. We can be there in 40 minutes. The helicopter ride was a blur of lights below and Coleman coordinating with ground teams over the radio. Amara used the time to think through everything she knew about aerosol poisons. Crawford's network had shown sophistication in delivery methods. This wouldn't be simple. They landed on Mount Sinai's helipad at 2:51 a.m., 9 minutes until the threatened activation. The ICU was in controlled chaos. Patients had been evacuated from the immediate area, but moving everyone was impossible. Too many were on life support. The bomb squad had located the device, but hadn't touched it yet. It's complex, the squad leader, Captain James Mitchell, explained as Amara arrived. Multiple canisters, electronic trigger, and what looks like a pressure-sensitive anti-tampering mechanism. Amara looked at the device through the bomb squad's fiber-optic camera. It was elegant in its lethality, for canisters connected to the hospital's ventilation system, designed to disperse their contents throughout the entire ICU. Can you identify the substances? Captain Mitchell asked. Amara studied the visible markings. The blue canister, that's consistent with concentrated tetrodotoxin solution. The red one, that could be aerosolized thallium. But these other two, she paused, noticing something. Wait, the green one has condensation on it. It's refrigerated. Why refrigerate poison? Because it's not poison. It's bacteria or virus. Something biological that needs to stay cold to remain viable. The implications hit her. This isn't just about killing people. It's about creating an outbreak, a medical crisis that would shut down the entire hospital. Can we defuse it? The timer shows 3 minutes, the captain said. If we try to disconnect it and trigger the anti-tampering. We need another approach, Amara said. Her mind raced through options. Then she remembered something from her janitor training, of all things. The ventilation system has an emergency seal protocol. For chemical spills, we can isolate this section completely, but the device will still go off. Yes, but contained. And she looked around the maintenance room. We can create negative pressure, make the air flow into this room, not out. The vacuum system for the surgical suites, we can reverse it. Captain Mitchell looked skeptical. You want to turn this room into a vacuum. Not a complete vacuum, just enough negative pressure that when the device triggers, everything gets sucked into the room instead of blown out. That's insane. That's brilliant, Dr. Stone said, appearing with a team of respiratory therapists. The surgical vacuum system is powerful enough, but someone would have to stay inside to manage the connections. I'll do it, Amara said. Absolutely not, Coleman protested. You're a civilian. I'm the only one who knows both the ventilation system and the poisons involved. I know exactly what pressure we need to maintain. The timer showed 90 seconds. Captain Mitchell made the call. Everyone out except Johnson. Get those vacuum lines ready. Amara worked with practiced efficiency, connecting surgical vacuum lines to the room's ventilation outputs. Her hands were steady despite the countdown timer in her peripheral vision. 60 seconds. She sealed the door edges with medical tape, the same technique she'd used to save Graham 3 days ago. The room's air pressure began to drop as the vacuum system engaged. 30 seconds. Through the observation window, she could see Elena, Graham, who'd arrived via his jet, Dr. Stone, and Coleman watching. Graham was shouting something, probably ordering her to get out, but she couldn't hear through the sealed room. 10 seconds. Amara positioned herself in the corner farthest from the device, pulled her shirt over her nose and mouth, and braced. 3, 2, 1. The device erupted with a soft pop. Not an explosion, but a pressurized release. For clouds of different colors burst from the canisters. The vacuum system roared to life, pulling the deadly cocktail toward the sealed vents. The negative pressure was working. Instead of spreading through the hospital, the poisons were being contained. But the green canister's contents, the biological agent, formed an aerosol that hung in the air longer than the others. Amara held her breath, watching the cloud slowly, too slowly, being drawn toward the vacuum ports. Her lungs began to burn. She couldn't hold her breath much longer. Then she noticed something, the surgical irrigation system. If she could trigger it, flood the room with water, it would knock the aerosol out of the air. She lunged for the control panel, vision starting to blur from lack of oxygen. Her fingers found the emergency irrigation trigger, just as her body demanded she breathe. Water exploded from the ceiling, drenching everything. The aerosol cloud condensed, droplets falling to the floor instead of hanging in the air. Amara gasped, breathing in wet but clean air. Through the observation window, she saw relief on everyone's faces. But then Graham pointed urgently at something behind her. She turned. A second device, smaller, attached to the underside of a medical cart. This one had no timer. It was remote activated. "There's another one," she shouted, though she wasn't sure anyone could hear her through the sealed room. The device's LED lit up red. Someone, somewhere had just triggered it. Amara didn't think. She grabbed the medical cart and shoved it into the room's hazmat disposal chute, a reinforced steel chamber designed for contaminated materials. She slammed the chute door just as the second device detonated. The explosion was muffled but still strong enough to knock her backward. The hazmat chute contained the blast, though its door bulged outward, seals straining. For a moment, everything was quiet except for the continued hiss of the irrigation system and the roar of the vacuum pumps. Then the all-clear siren sounded. Hazmat teams in full protective gear entered, checking air quality, checking Amara for exposure. Minimal contamination, one announced. The irrigation and vacuum system worked, air quality returning to safe levels. As they helped Amara out of the room, Graham grabbed her in an unexpected hug. You could have died, but I didn't, and neither did anyone else. Agent Coleman was on her phone, her face grim. The remote trigger for the second device, we traced the signal. It came from inside the hospital. Crawford had another accomplice? Elena asked. Or someone we haven't identified yet, Coleman said. She turned to Amara. The text warning you. Whoever sent it knew about the first device, but maybe not the second. Amara thought about that. Someone with conscience enough to warn them, but still complicit enough to be involved. Check the medical residence, she said suddenly. Crawford would have recruited young doctors, promised them positions in his new order. One of them got scared and warned us, but couldn't fully betray the cause. Within an hour, they had their answer. Dr. Kevin Lawson, a third-year resident who'd been in Graham's room during the initial crisis, broke down under questioning. He'd been Crawford's protege, seduced by promises of rapid advancement and revolutionary change. He said we were saving medicine. Lawson sobbed in the interrogation room. That sometimes you have to destroy to rebuild. But when I saw Mr. Whitaker dying, when I saw his daughter's face, I couldn't. I sent the warning. But I didn't know about the second device, I swear. Who else is involved? Coleman demanded. I don't know everyone. Crawford compartmentalized. But there's a list. He kept a list on an encrypted server. I can give you access. The list, when decrypted, was staggering. Over 100 names across the country. Not all were active conspirators. Some are marked as potential recruits or sympathizers. But at least 30 had been part of active planning. It's going to take months to investigate all of these, Coleman said. Then we'd better get started, Graham said. He turned to Amara. This patient advocacy department we discussed, I want it expanded, not just for Whitaker Medical, but as a model for the entire industry. And I want you to help design the protocols for preventing something like this from happening again. 6 months later, Amara Johnson stood at a podium in the grand ballroom of the New York Marriott Marquis. The room was filled with healthcare executives, doctors, nurses, and importantly, support staff from hospitals across the country. The first National Healthcare Equity Summit was about to begin. My name is Amara Johnson, she began, her voice carrying the quiet authority she'd developed over the past months. 6 months ago, I was invisible, a housekeeper at Mount Sinai Elite Medical Center, someone who cleaned up after important people made important decisions. Today, I stand here as the Director of Patient Advocacy for Whitaker Medical Systems, and more importantly, as proof that every voice in healthcare matters. The audience applauded. In the front row, Graham Whitaker watched with something approaching paternal pride. Beside him, Elena smiled, now serving as CEO of Whitaker Industries after her father's semi-retirement. We're here because a crisis forced us to confront uncomfortable truths, Amara continued. Dr. Mitchell Crawford and his network didn't emerge from nowhere. They grew from the fertile ground of systemic problems we'd all been ignoring. The voiceless workers who see everything but are heard by no one. The patients whose concerns are dismissed because they don't speak the right medical language. The nurses and technicians whose observations are ignored because they're not doctors. She clicked to the next slide, showing statistics from the past 6 months. Since implementing our new advocacy protocols, adverse events at participating hospitals have decreased by 30%. Not because we hired more doctors or bought better equipment, but because we started listening to everyone. Dr. Margaret Stone, now heading the new Integrated Care Committee, presented next. The traditional hierarchy of medicine nearly killed Graham Whitaker. It wasn't lack of knowledge that failed, it was arrogance. The assumption that wisdom only comes from certain sources. The summit continued throughout the day, but Amara found herself drawn to a smaller session in the afternoon. A meeting of hospital support staff, the invisible army that kept healthcare running. Ms. Johnson, a young woman, approached her, wearing the gray uniform Amara knew so well. I'm Keisha Williams. I'm a housekeeper at Brooklyn General. Because of what you did, they've started asking for our input on patient observations. Last week, I noticed a patient's unusual reaction to cleaning chemicals. Turned out he had an undocumented allergy. The doctors said I might have saved his life. Stories like Keisha's had been pouring in from across the country. The Amara Protocol, as some called it, required hospitals to create formal channels for all staff to report observations, with protections against retaliation and rewards for valuable input. That evening, at the summit's gala dinner, held, ironically, in the same style of ballroom where Graham had collapsed, Amara found herself at the head table. The woman who'd once mopped these floors now sat among healthcare's most powerful leaders. Graham stood to give a toast. 6 months ago, I nearly died. Not from disease, but from hubris, my own and that of the system I helped build. Amara Johnson saved my life, but more importantly, she opened my eyes. We built a healthcare system that valued credentials over compassion, degrees over diligence, titles over truth. He raised his glass toward Amara. To the invisible heroes who keep us alive, and to a future where no voice goes unheard. After dinner, Amara stepped outside for air. The Manhattan night was cool, autumn beginning to touch the city. She was surprised to find Marcus Whitaker waiting by the entrance. I wondered if you'd come, she said. Marcus looked different from 6 months ago. Prison had humbled him, though he'd only served 3 months before being released to house arrest as part of his cooperation agreement. I wanted to apologize. Personally, you were desperate, Amara said. Desperation makes people do terrible things. That's generous of you. It's honest. Your father was going to disinherit you. You felt cornered. That doesn't excuse what you did, but I understand it. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He's forgiven me, you know. Dad, not forgotten, but forgiven. Says I can work my way back, starting at the bottom. I'm in a mailroom at one of his subsidiaries. How's that going? Humbling, but maybe that's what I needed. He paused. I heard about the scholarship program in your brother's name. I'd like to contribute, if you'll let me. Amara studied him. 6 months ago, this man had been willing to kill his father for money. Now he stood before her, genuinely trying to make amends. People can change, she said finally. The program would welcome your support. Back inside, Agent Coleman found Amara. Final reports in. All of Crawford's network has been prosecuted. 43 convictions, including Crawford himself, life without parole. The others got sentences ranging from 5 to 25 years. And the reforms? Homeland Security is implementing new protocols for medical supply chain security. The FDA is requiring new tracking systems for all controlled substances. And your advocacy model is being adopted by the Joint Commission as a recommended standard. It's a start, Amara said. It's more than that. You've changed an entire industry. Amara thought about David, about all the invisible people whose voices have been silenced by systemic arrogance. The industry was ready to change. It just needed a crisis to catalyze it. The evening continued with presentations and networking, but Amara found herself in a quiet corner with Elena, who'd become a close friend through everything they'd endured. You know, Elena said, 6 months ago, I barely knew you existed. Now I can't imagine navigating any of this without you. Your father offered me a position I wasn't qualified for on paper, Amara replied. You supported that decision when you could have opposed it. Best decision we ever made. The board tried to push back initially, you know. Said we needed someone with an advanced degree running the department. What changed their minds? Elena smiled. I asked them a simple question. Would they rather have someone with perfect credentials who missed attempted murder, or someone without credentials who stopped it? They were interrupted by Amara's phone. She smiled, seeing the caller ID. Her mother. Mama, I told you I'd be late tonight. I know, baby. I just wanted to tell you I'm proud of you. David would be too. After the call, Amara walked to the windows overlooking Times Square. The city pulsed with life below, millions of people, each with their own struggles, their own stories that might go unheard. Graham joined her at the window. Penny, for your thoughts? I was thinking about Crawford's last message. The flock remains diseased. He wasn't entirely wrong. No, he wasn't. But his solution was murder. Yours is transformation. Sometimes I wonder if it's enough. The advocacy program, the reforms, were putting bandages on a system that might need surgery. Graham was quiet for a moment. You know what the difference is between you and Crawford? He saw problems and decided to destroy. You see the same problems and choose to build. That's why you'll succeed where he failed. Dr. Stone approached them. Amara, there's someone who wants to meet you. She led them to a quiet corner where an elderly black woman sat in a wheelchair, attended by a young nurse. This is Mrs. Dorothy Banks, Dr. Stone said. She was admitted to Mount Sinai last week with symptoms that puzzled her doctors. But a housekeeper noticed something. The timing of her reactions correlated with certain medications. Turned out she had a rare genetic variant affecting drug metabolism. The housekeeper insisted the doctors test for it. Mrs. Banks reached for Amara's hand. That housekeeper said she learned to speak up because of you. Because you showed her that her observations mattered. You didn't just save that billionaire, honey. You saved me too, and probably hundreds of others. Amara felt tears prick her eyes. This was why she'd accepted Graham's offer. Why she'd thrown herself into building the advocacy program. Not for recognition or advancement, but for the Dorothy Banks of the world, for the people like David who needed someone to see what others missed. Later, as the summit wound down, Amara stood once more at the podium for closing remarks. 6 months ago, a conspiracy nearly destroyed American healthcare leadership. But in stopping it, we learned something crucial. The real threat to healthcare isn't external, it's internal blindness. It's the assumption that some voices matter more than others. It's the arrogance that says wisdom only comes with certain degrees or titles. She looked out at the audience. Doctors humbled by recent events, support staff empowered by new recognition, administrators grappling with systematic change. Dr. Crawford was wrong about the solution, but he was right about one thing. Healthcare needed to change. Not through destruction, but through inclusion. Not through poisoning, but through listening. Every person in this room, from the chief of surgery to the night janitor, has something valuable to contribute. The question is, are we brave enough to hear it? The applause was thunderous. But more importantly, Amara saw understanding in faces that had once dismissed her. She saw determination in the eyes of other invisible workers who'd found their voices. She saw a system beginning, slowly, to transform. As the evening ended, Amara walked through the hotel service corridors, a shortcut she'd learned during her catering days. She passed housekeepers preparing rooms for the night, their gray uniforms identical to what she'd once worn. One of them, a young Latina woman, recognized her. "Ms. Johnson, you're the one who... You saved all those people." "I saw what others missed," Amara corrected gently. "Just like you probably see things every day that could help people, if someone would listen. But who listens to us? Now, everyone should. And if they don't, you speak louder. You insist. You remember that your observations, your intelligence, your wisdom, they matter just as much as anyone's." The woman nodded, standing a little straighter. Amara emerged from the service corridors into the main lobby, where Graham and Elena waited. "Ready to go?" Elena asked. "Dad's having his 6-month checkup tomorrow. He insists you be there. Still don't trust the doctors?" Amara teased Graham. "I trust them fine, but I trust them more when you're watching." As they walked toward the exit, Graham's phone buzzed. He looked at it and frowned. The FBI. They've discovered another network, similar to Crawford's, but in Europe. They want our help identifying patterns. Amara sighed. The work, it seemed, was far from over. "What do you think?" Graham asked, ready to save the world again. Amara thought of David, of Mrs. Banks, of Keisha Williams, of all the invisible voices waiting to be heard. Not save it, just help it listen better. They stepped out into the New York night. The city sprawled before them, millions of lives intersecting, each with stories that deserved to be heard. 6 months ago, Amara Johnson had been invisible, mopping floors while 20 doctors failed to save a billionaire. Now, she was building a future where no voice would go unheard, where wisdom would be recognized wherever it originated, where the housekeepers and the chiefs of surgery would work together to save lives. It wasn't perfect. The system still had massive problems, entrenched resistance, institutional blindness that would take years to fully address. But it was changing. One voice, one observation, one saved life at a time. As they drove through Manhattan, Amara pulled out her phone and looked at a photo she kept as her wallpaper. David at his high school graduation, smile bright, future unlimited. I kept my promise, she whispered to the image. Your death meant something. It changed everything. And in the reflection of the window, she saw not a housekeeper, not a director, not a hero, just a woman who'd refused to be invisible when visibility mattered most. The real work of transformation had only just begun. Have you ever wondered how many lives could be saved if we truly listened to every voice in the room, regardless of who they are or what uniform they wear? If this story made you think differently about the invisible heroes around us, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories that challenge what we think we know.